It's my big pleasure to welcome composer and pianist John Beasley at Jam Music Lab University. Hi, John.
Hey,
Great
Marcus.
to be here.
Great to be here. Thank you for bringing me out.
You're most welcome. John, you're playing with some of the important jazz musicians. You played with some of the important guys who already passed away, like Miles Davis, Freddie Hubbard, but you're now playing with Quincy Jones, Diane Reeves, Herbie Hancock. How did your career start? How did you come to music and start to work as a professional musician?
My parents were both musicians, and my dad was teaching and gigging around the area I grew up in, Shreveport, Louisiana, and in Dallas, Texas. And so I was always dragged to rehearsals, and I wanted to be a musician from a very young age. You know, I knew what I wanted to do. So I kind of got a little head start. And by the time I was in high school, I was sort of gigging already, and local musicians and older guys. And I was living in Denton, Texas, and we have a famous jazz school there called, well, now it's called University of North Texas, where they had 10 or 11 lab bands, they called them, or big bands, and lots of activity, and but a very small town. And by the time I graduated high school, there weren't a lot of opportunities for jazz degree. It was stay in Denton, Texas, and go to the school, or Bloomington, Indiana, University of Indiana, which was very similar to the small town I grew up in, or Berkeley. And I decided that I just wanted to learn from older musicians. And at this time, there was lots of work still, you know, pre-computer, pre-DJ in a way, you know. So even at the worst, you could, you could work in a hotel bar, you know, and or play parties. And so this is kind of what I did. I took every gig, and when you do this, you start meeting other musicians who have other gigs, and they start recommending you, and starting to practice and practice together, and sort of, so you start selecting, kind of building your own community, and in a lot of ways, I'm doing the same thing now as I was doing when I was 18, 19 years old. You know, I'm meeting new musicians and going to rehearsals and then going to gigs. You know.
So it was your school to start to play with musicians very early.
Yeah.
It was not so much about studying music.
Well, I studied early because my
okay.
father was he taught composition and arranging, and I was playing oboe in school, and they made me take piano lessons as a kid. I was never really interested in piano so much, but I was trying to play guitar. I was a terrible guitar player, and in a garage band, we called them in America, and the piano player quit one day, and somehow I went, oh, maybe I should try the piano because it's not happening, and so this is how I kind of started playing popular piano.
It's a little bit like Dr. John, I guess. He was also a guitar player before he started to play the piano. This is what I heard.
Oh, cool.
Maybe the rumor goes that his hand was he was shot in the hand, and I don't know.
That's a good New Orleans blues story, you know.
We have to check.
I don't have anything that dramatic.
Okay. So you're a piano player. You're a composer. Is it correct that your mother was a conductor or was conducting music as well? So it was also an influence to.
My mom was a junior high and high school band director in the 50s and 60s, and in very small towns in the South. Yeah. And so she was sort of a pioneer. This is not an ordinary job for a woman in these days.
In those days, yeah.
In those days. So her father was a music educator, a band director as well. So my mom used to kind of plug me into sections of her bands where they needed a little help or something. So I learned how to play timpani and mallets and cornet and um, little flute, you know.
Yeah.
So she kind of plugged me in all these. So yeah, my mom was a very good music educator for kids.
That's very interesting. So, and now you're one of the musical directors at the Monk Institute of Jazz, and you're a musical director of International Jazz Day.
Yes.
So, how did this come?
Well, over the last 15 years ago or so, I started. Well, I got invited to be a musical director at American Idol. So this is 15 years ago or so, and this is sort of the beginning of these vocal competitions and a live band on TV again. So it's kind of back to the 50s and 60s where we had these live shows with a live band, and so they needed arrangers and someone to help, work with the contestants, with the singers, and help them, help them choose a song, choose a key, all this kind of stuff. So it was very interesting. And it was also working with amateurs, you know. A lot of these people had never even sung with a band before. So part of it was educational, you know. So because both my parents and my grandfather were music educators, I sort of rebelled against this until around this time. And then I realized, I really enjoy this, and if there's a way that I can give something back. So it started with American Idol, and then through Idol, I had a reputation now of becoming a musical director, for TV shows and stuff like this. And I met Queen Latifah and ended up working with her for a couple of her tours, and a few more TV shows, and I was called to work with a really great Indian musician named A.R. Rahman, and we did a whole big high production tour after he wrote the music for Slumdog Millionaire.
Oh yeah.
So it became an international hit. So we had a big tour, and so this is how the musical direction thing happened. And then because of my jazz background, George Duke was always the musical director for about 25 years for the Monk Institute. And there was a big 25 anniversary show that he couldn't make, so he recommended me.
Okay.
He and Diane Reeves, and this is how I got involved.
Wow.
And then the next year was International Jazz Day, and they asked me to.
So you've been in the game from then on.
Yeah.
At Monk Institute, yeah. So I think you have a very close relationship to the to Thelonious Monk's music. You have an own project which is called Monkastra, and which deals about new interpretation about the music of Thelonious Monk. So what could you tell us about this idea?
Yeah, Monkastra is a sort of deconstruction and reconstruction of Monk's music through, I guess, my ears and my heart. You know, whatever I hear. It's unusual that it's a big band, but it's cool that it's a big band because it still has the jazz tradition. And when I listen to Monk, I hear a lot of Duke Ellington and Count Basie in his music anyway. And I always thought that maybe, and also the way he played was very orchestrated in a lot of ways. You know, the way he comped and the way he billed behind solos and played single lines, and sort of very big bandish, you know. So I thought this would be a good combination, and what I realized is that, you know, it's like mining for gold with him. His songs are inherently funky and rhythmic, so they actually work well with a lot of different type of rhythms, not just swing rhythms. And so I learned this, and then how pliable his music is. You know, I could stretch out melodies and sort of open up forms. It inspired all this. And so this is what we do with Monkastra.
And you're touring a lot.
Yeah, last year we did 35 shows.
Wow.
And we have I'm on my way to New Zealand tonight to play a jazz festival there.
Yeah.
So it was not really. I never dreamed that it could be, 2 records later, and we have 4 Grammy nominations, and touring and stuff.
Yeah,
I just
yeah.
thought it would be kind of a fun thing to do, and
Yeah.
it's blossomed into this. This is
Yeah.
one reason why I'm here, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, yes. I'm going to refer to this later on.
Yeah.
The Monk Institute has a very close relationship to International Jazz Day.
Mhm.
International Jazz Day is a yearly event organized by UNESCO, and I think it's kind of curated by the Monk Institute and its
Mhm.
musicians. And I think they have a philosophy that goes far beyond music itself. It's meant to be a celebration of music, and especially jazz, as a universal language, and might encourage people in the world to think about the fact that art is also sort of a communication. But if we face today's world, is it really like that? Do we have a chance as an artist to help a little bit to improve?
I think all through history, that's what has happened. UNESCO mandated every April 30th as International Jazz Day, very similar to Earth Day, Women's Day. So it's celebrated all over the world. And Herbie Hancock was an ambassador, a peace ambassador for UNESCO, and he pushed this legislation through. So it all started with Herbie. And the mission is to promote dialogue, and because jazz is improvisational and conversational, it's not like classical where you kind of have the same conversation every time you play. It could be a new conversation every time we play jazz, and because of the way it has spread to the Soviet Union when it was banned, but it was still people, went through a lot of great struggles to play the music. Wasn't ready, available, and smuggling in records. Same thing with Cuba. We were in Cuba, in Istanbul. We were there, and because the ambassador to Turkey in the, I believe, the 30s and 40s, was a jazz fanatic. He was living in Washington, D.C., and this was during segregation. So even in our own country, with segregation, these jazz musicians went through a lot of drama and a lot of struggle to make this music. So he would smuggle in jazz musicians through the back door, and he was always very supportive of civil rights. Now, in America, civil rights, music and art, during the 60s and 50s, jazz musicians were writing about, segregation, and you had Max Roach and Sonny Rollins write Freedom Jazz Suite. Charles Mingus wrote about a famous prison riot, Fabulous and Fabulous. John Coltrane wrote Alabama about a church bombing in Alabama. And Bob Dylan, of course, wrote about Vietnam and Joni Mitchell. And so it really changed the culture of America. And, the folk songs here, in Europe have always been sort of battle cries and for change, hopefully of our species progressing to more a peaceful coexistence. So that's what we're trying to do. And actually, now that I'm older and, I've become more spiritual, I'm trying to connect my humanity to my music. This is what I try to think of every time I play now, is to touch people and to maybe get them to think of something they never thought of before, or have a sense of humanity and brotherhood. So we have to counterbalance some of the more narrow-visioned part of humanity.
Well, maybe jazz is still able to show us how highly individualistic person
That's
get
true.
into a conversation and can create a group work
Yeah, a
that
new viewpoint,
combines
a new idea.
very different points of view. After all,
Yeah, it's like
And-
we're talking, you know,
yeah.
and someone has a new idea and they go, and it's inspiring,
Yeah.
and you want to try to, as an accompanist,
Yeah.
you know, help this person with this new idea.
Yeah.
You know, how can I add a little to push it further? You know.
what are the plans of International Jazz Day? I mean, I for myself could imagine that Vienna is an obvious place, but are there any other?
Well, there's rumors.
plans?
Nobody's
Yes.
been announced quite yet. But
I heard
we've been to
Sydney,
Paris,
maybe? Yeah,
and
Paris, yeah.
we've been to Paris, Istanbul, Cuba, the White House in D.C.
Yeah.
We were just in St. Petersburg, Russia,
Yeah.
Osaka.
Yeah.
So I'm sure it'll be an interesting place.
Yeah.
And yes, I do think Vienna would be a very wise choice at some point.
Well, we'll see. Now you're in Vienna. We are in Vienna at Jam Music Lab University, and you're the winner of the grand prize of Spheres of a Genius, which is a composition competition done by the Radio Symphony Orchestra of Vienna and Jam Music Lab, in the light of the fact that Thelonious Monk would have become 100 years old last year. And the competition was meant to create music which might bring this highly individualistic and creative style and this very original music of Monk into the year 2018. And so many congratulations to
Thank you.
the first prize. How's that for you now, being in Vienna, working with the classical orchestra? And
well,
you know.
I've written pieces for orchestra that for film cues, you know, that are 2 minutes long or whatever. But this is my first experience writing the arc of a piece for 12 minutes long, and how to tell the story and how to make the arc, and then thinking about Thelonious, not only his style of music but his personality, and also the struggles that he went through to make his art. So the piece kind of starts with a sort of a whimsical melody, maybe a ballad done in the style, but then it starts going into has a little dark episode and mysterious episode, and it works its way out and into some sort of resolution. But as with Monk, there's always these twists and turns that you don't expect, and I tried to put these little sections of sort of fantastical, or he had a bit of a mental disorder.
Yeah.
We don't know what it was because it was so long ago.
Yeah.
Probably, you would hope if he was alive today, they would have some kind of new therapy or maybe some new drugs for this. But how do you get inside the mind of maybe an autistic person or something like this? So it was very interesting to write and to have all these sort of inspiration points, and to have your first sort of classical piece premiered here in Vienna is wow, something I would never dream of,
Well, I think it's very interesting and challenging for all involved people and artists, because since Monk was such an authentic and innovative musician as well, I think that being innovative always means to get out of your comfort zone in a way.
Yeah.
And so the classical musicians now have to deal with improvised music and with sorts of items they're not playing so many times.
Hyper-rhythmic.
And for the composer, it means to deal with the language of classical musicians. So you've been hearing the first rehearsal yesterday. How was your first impression?
We have a joke. I don't know if it's a childish joke or not. When you write for Hollywood, and a lot of times You know, you've written the score, you've mixed it, and usually nowadays they have you mix into stems, you know. So at the very end, you know, the producers and the director had the power of, you know, don't need these brass here, you know, or Xing it or mixing it very low. So we usually say, this is like going to your own funeral
Yeah, well.
if you go to the dub. But I guess maybe because I'm a jazz musician now and I'm a little older, you know, when you're writing the piece nowadays, you write in the computer and it plays it back, and it plays it pretty perfectly, you know, too perfectly actually, you know. So I'm always curious to see how a conductor and other musicians interpret your music, you know, without really saying anything, you know. So it was very interesting to hear it in other tempos. You know, he took it a little faster than I would have in a couple spots, but it's good to hear this. And so it was. I haven't quite absorbed how I feel about it yet, you know. So I'll wait because they were stopping and rehearsing a few places. But you know, I of course heard some mistakes in the writing, so there was a few notes I had to fix and stuff like this. But actually, very much like doing a film score. You know, you go on the stage and you have an opportunity to tweak it at the last minute. And he was very open, and the musicians are excellent in this radio symphony because they're used to playing 20th century music and contemporary music, and I think it'll be very nice.
Yeah, well, John, you're also an educator. Monk Institute has a very strong relationship to music education, of course. So is there any basic philosophy for you as a music educator, or how would you describe your work in terms of music education?
Well, I think it's really important for young musicians, well, all musicians, I guess, to even though they might have the focus of, let's say, jazz, but to learn all kinds of styles of music. Because really jazz is the original, you know, fusion music. It's really what it is. It's blues, it's American, black American music. In fact, I don't even want to call it jazz music anymore. Black American music or social music. You know, it comes from that experience. So it's Africa, and then in New Orleans they're exposed to waltzes, you know, Chopin and Viennese waltzes, and this is where stride piano came from.
Opera,
opera. They used to have Creole opera. So it's all this fusion. So, you know, and then it's expanded into, you know, R&B and blues and hip hop and you know, classical music, country, folk music for sure. You know, similar to the way Bartok used to. You know, take folk songs and make classical music out of it. You know, so you know, my experience playing in R&B bands and has really helped me play in the pocket when I play jazz. And also, I would not be able to play R&B music unless I had a jazz background because I didn't come from the gospel church. I came from, you know, from jazz first. So I like to try to get piano students to play drums and, you know, play the other, draw correlations between how gospel piano relates to jazz piano and how R&B, how R&B and gospel, and then the R&B back to the jazz. You know, the country music, country piano is very blues oriented as well. You know, Appalachian music, how all this, and then of course, you know, all our heroes, all my heroes, Miles, Herbie Hancock, Wayne Shorter, Coltrane, they listen to all kinds of music. You know, they didn't just listen to jazz. You know, so that's sort of my philosophy, to try to keep that tradition. You know, friends of mine that work with Art Blakey, they say, "Art, what did you used to listen to, man?" He'd say, "Well, I listen to R&B." You know, He didn't listen to jazz. He played jazz, but he listened to R&B. You know.
Yeah. So understand emotionally also all those tracks.
Yeah, and also to put what's going on in their generation right now into their music, because that's what they did.
Yeah.
You know, if you're gonna still play like John Coltrane, that's beautiful, but that's what was happening in 1960. You know, what's happening now, and how can you put your personality and your generational spin into this music?
So what's happening now for you as an artist in the next month, years? What are the plans?
Well, I'm heading to New Zealand tonight to play with Monkestra. We have a couple Monkestra gigs here in Europe again. Going to China. Yeah. This summer we'll be in Europe. I'm writing some arrangements for a new Carnegie Hall jazz band. They're going to go on tour with Sean Jones and Diane Reeves. So I'm making some arrangements for that. And then trying to dream up my next project. I have one more project to do with this record company, and I'm trying to be open to what it could be.
So John, thank you very much, and I would look forward very much seeing you back in Vienna soon.
Me too. I love Vienna, and I really appreciate what you're doing with your school, the Jam Academy, and Vienna is truly the city of music. You know.
Thanks a lot, and it was great that we could have you here. Good travel to New Zealand, and as I said, hopefully seeing soon. Thank you.
I hope so. Thanks, Marcus.
Thank you.